Good morning, everybody. I'm sure you must be wondering, oh look, Strimtom, he made that interesting Necromancer Cleric build. I wonder how he's going to do when he hits Ravenloft. I wonder how he's going to do when he hits Sharn, an adventure area that's full of almost exclusively constructs. Well, I'll tell you how I did it. I managed to level this character all the way up to level 20, and the secret was skipping those two quest zones. Now, I know, obviously that is not ideal. Both those areas give good gear, and on top of that, have good experience points. However, for this character, I was decidedly not casting things unless they happen to be like negative energy spells, so fighting monsters that were mostly immune was a little bit difficult. However, I have good news for you. At the end of this video, I'm going to explain to you how to build this character, and during that time, I'm going to tell you about the things I would change to make it so that these problems are non-existent, how to handle constructs, and how to handle undead without any problems on this type of character. In fact, I'm also going to make sure that's included in the build that I'm going to be posting on the forums, so that way if you want a written guide, you'll be able to follow something that will be just like this, but way better. But you see, I wanted to really test it out. What can you do if you don't use those spells? How powerful are the negative spells alone? Because you have to ask yourself this, because if you don't, you miss out on some of the possible gems that you could find in the field. Some of the more unique spells or different ways to interact with the monsters, especially considering that all of the different spells have different targeting ranges and areas. The negative spells are a little bit different than some of the other ones, especially given that a lot of them need hard targeting versus something like Blade Barrier or Comet Fall, which does not. So now that this character is level 20, what is my final verdict on Necromancer Cleric? Realistically, I think Necromancer Cleric is fantastic. The single target damage is exceedingly high. I had very bad gear for pretty much the entire process. This character is using almost exclusively randomly generated loot with very little named gear, no Sharn gear, no Ravenloft gear, just random stuff that I picked up all along the way, which meant that I really had to scrape to get by at every step of the way. As a result, my spells weren't hitting as hard as they probably would if you decided to build this character and actually take the time to build up the item sets, do different quests, loot more things, scan the auction house more thoroughly, as opposed to just trying to get it done in 4 days. But even given this, it held up really well. The DCs were very strong, given that this character as a shifter gets a bonus 7 wisdom from my race, and picking up all the extra wisdom out of the actual Divine Disciple tree. This character was able to crowd control a lot of things using the Howl of Terror spell-like ability that I started using around level 14, which was actually pretty strong and really useful for this character, able to lock down whole groups, including Reapers. And on top of that, this character just vaporizes Reapers. Oh no, there's a Reaper there? Well, guess what? Necrotic Ray, oh, it's gone. Having the ability to do really high single target damage is invaluable, and it's so useful against Reapers. However, I wanted to warn you of some of the possible pitfalls of this character, because while it was very strong, I did run into a few issues, and I want to make sure that you guys don't run into the issues that I ran into with this type of character. One of the major issues that you run into are monsters that actually cast the spell Death Ward. If you didn't know, Death Ward makes you immune to all negative energy damage. It's not just instant death effects. A monster can't hit you with the spell Harm or inflict damage if you happen to have the Death Ward effect on you. Now, most monsters don't cast Death Ward. However, there was a time in the game where instant kill spells were all the rage, and as a result, many monsters cast Death Ward. Or even more heinously, monsters in the Lords of Dust chain, the priestesses of the Drow, happen to cast Death Ward Mass. This basically disables all of your magic. Now, I had the brilliant idea. Why don't I just use Dispel Magic? Remove the effect, and everything is cool. Well, that doesn't work. I was level 17 or 18, and I'm trying to do Dispel Magic on a 28th level spellcaster, which the math doesn't hold out. It's almost impossible. You're very unlikely to even dispel that magic. Plus, Dispel Magic only hits one person, and you don't get access to Mordenkainen's Disjunction like you're some type of wizard. So that is immediately a big problem. The second thing is undead and constructs. Now, undead are easier to deal with than constructs, given that undead can be removed with undeath to death, among other things. However, your negative energy damage becomes a problem when you have a mix of undead and non-undead. A lot of your damage spells are area of effect. In fact, one of your best ones, Inflict Critical Wounds Mass, is an area of effect spell that will immediately heal all of the neighboring undead back to full health. Also, all of your undead allies, but most importantly, the undead bad guys. This became a problem for me when I was running a couple quests, such as the Inspired Quarter Chain, in which there's a boss fight where you have several undead monsters clamoring around the final boss. I can't really hit the boss because all of the other monsters are getting in the way and will block all of my shots because I have ray spells that have to hit people, and my AoE spells will also heal all the ghosts. So I spent a lot of time during that fight just straight up standing there, which was not ideal, but hey, it got the job done, healing people and doing your backup role. The nice benefit of playing as a cleric is in a situation, if you're not solo, if your spells become less effective, you can just decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to heal and support my allies and keep everyone alive, and they'll get the job done for me. And this is why I don't say you need the healing domain. Instead, you can pick any other domain you want, because it doesn't matter what type of cleric you are. You always get the healing spells, and you can always cast out a heal here or a heal there to help out a friend so they can carry you to that sweet, sweet dungeon loot. Now, that's undead, but what about constructs? Well, actually, I happen to have an incredible solution for you. This solution is going to defeat constructs and undead and monsters that have Death Ward. It's called Other Spells. That's right. The Cleric comes equipped with all sorts of different spells, specifically physical damage spells such as Blade Barrier and Comet Fall. Now, while Blade Barrier and Comet Fall aren't the sexiest of spells, Blade Barrier still does its job of running around in a circle, letting all the monsters chase after you while you run them through a Blade Barrier or two over and over. But not only that, you can actually pick up a bunch of different spells that'll help you out on your journey that aren't just the physical spells. They can still work against many different types of constructs. As an easy example, Firestorm hits like an absolute truck, and if you happen to have a fire spell power item you can just swap in when you're fighting constructs, you'll be very happy with yourself. You don't even need to build in fire spell power into your gear set. If you just happen to have a weapon that has fire spell power on it, you can swap in the weapon when you want to cast the spells and then change to another weapon when you're done casting those spells. Similarly, you also get to pick up Holy Smite, which just does so much additional damage to a whole group of monsters. Honestly, it'll carry you through pretty much every quest that has a meager amount of constructs in it, because most constructs don't have as much health as the regular humans that kind of go with them, and you'll be dealing a ton of damage to all of those monsters. So the real question becomes, how does this character perform in epics? When you're level 30, well, I'm deferring to the expertise of other members of the community that I've talked to, spoken to, and people that I know that have been playing it already, and what I can tell you is that Necromancer Cleric does pretty well. Before this, a lot of people were playing Death Domain and Cleric anyway, just so they had a lot of the instant kills, so while they were also healing, they could be instant killing monsters at level 30. However, now you don't just get instant kills, you also get damage. Yes, you will still run into the same problems where there are monsters that you can't always deal damage to, but again, Firestorm is a really powerful spell that you just get to throw out. On top of that, Firestorm and Flameshark are both buffed by the Divine Disciple tree, no matter which type of cleric you decide to play as, and even better, once you get to the capstone and you take Transcendence, you also get all of the light spells to go along with it, meaning that Sunbeam, a very high damage single target spell, will be at your disposal for removing enemies that are normally resistant to those types of damage, such as the negative damage. Not only that, the negative damage is really, really high with this character, especially with the Inflict Critical Wounds mass. It's doing more damage than a Delayed Blast Fireball. While it's underneath an Acid Well, it has a pretty short cooldown as well, so you're able to kind of chunk it out whenever you need to. It's not as high damage as Sorcerer, but when the monsters are vulnerable to negative energy, it's definitely more damage than a Bard, and your single target damage is very, very good thanks to your multiple uses of Necrotic Ray. Overall, this was an extremely fun character to play, and on top of that, it was very easy to level, it was very durable, and I got to play as a shifter, so I have no real complaints. If you want to try out Necromancer Cleric, play a regular Cleric, and follow the advice I'm going to be able to give you in the next section for building it. On top of that, if you want to learn some of these lessons with me along the way about what you should or should not do, make sure you check out the Twitch livestream at twitch.tv/Strimtom. That's twitch.tv/Strimtom, because I had a ton of fun playing this character and getting the chance to share it with the world, and it was really fun to do quests at the request of some of the people watching, so we could go through and ensure that I wasn't skipping quests that I thought were hard, but was still trying to challenge my own character. Leveling through Reaper mode is no joke, and especially on a first life character, it can be quite difficult. But this character, it didn't really feel difficult. It felt straightforward and simple, and I'm looking forward to trying something new next. Anyways, I'm going to pass it over to me with the build review. So if you'd like to make your own death-defying, death-dealing spellcaster Necromancer Cleric, look no further than the Shifter Cleric, wrong menu, inflict pain, receive gain. Now you see, this character is interesting because you only really focus on the wisdom and not so much the charisma. However, there are a lot of different builds you can use to also focus in on the charisma to get some of that turning with this character. I decided to avoid it to really stress test the negative spells. And what I learned is that being able to turn undead is the greatest. So I definitely recommend, if you do make this character, put a few more points into a charisma. Starting with a 14 or a 16 will help out a lot. Especially putting some points early into your Radiant Servantry for turning will help too. But that's kind of one of the things you got to focus on here. Having all the wisdom is great, and being able to start with a 16 Constitution was nice. But it would have been better for me to start with a 14 Constitution and instead start with a 14 Charisma. That way I could have been able to turn stuff, and it would have been a lot stronger throughout the majority of the game. So the written version of this character build is in fact going to start with a higher Charisma, specifically for that purpose. However, the stats are pretty good. I mean, my character is a pure shifter, first life character, no tomes, and I've got 44 wisdom. While raging, it bumps up all the way up to 48, which for a character with no epic destiny, at level 20, that's pretty good. If I was an Exalted Angel right now, I would be chilling with 52 wisdom, which for this type of character is pretty good. Now, as far as that, we've also got the saving throws, again, being reasonably strong. These are the saving throws in town. However, between Holy Aura and also Prayer, your character has an extra +9, which is really strong. So you should see your saves, like right here, this is enough to do some, like, pretty much every hard in the game, and even some elite level saves, which are pretty good, especially in low epics. And at the end game, you should be seeing pretty good results there as well. As far as the skills, as I mentioned, heal's the only one you need. In theory, you could also focus on spellcraft if you wanted to use the other spells like fire and light, and in fact, you will likely be using a lot of light spells with this build anyway, so getting Spellcraft is probably a good idea. However, if you have no tomes like me, heal is pretty much all you need. As far as the feats go, they were fairly straightforward, grabbing Metamagic feats Quicken and Maximize for the first few levels, just like before. And on top of that, I also wanted to pick up extra spell points to grab mental training and mental toughness and improve mental toughness. Mental toughness and improved mental toughness are really, really good feats if you don't have any stats, because they just give you mana to start to play around with. As you get towards the end game, when you're level 30, these are much less impactful than they are at the beginning, because the amount of spell points you can get from other sources is much greater at the end game. Not just because the numbers are bigger, but also the variety of gear is bigger. When you're at low levels, you maybe get one item with wizardry and that's it. But the higher levels, you have the wizardry, you have the insightful wizardry. Heck, you can have legendary green steel for extra spell points if you want. So there's a lot of different options to get more spell points and percentage spell point bonuses as well. The spell focus feats, I took Necromancy and Greater Necromancy because that's pretty much all you need. And of course for the domain, Death Domain. Getting Master of Death domain at level 14, allowing you to just instant kill pretty much whatever you want. It's very valuable with this character. It costs only 20 spell points, so while the cooldown is a little long, it's pretty much like you always have enough mana to throw this at the first monster you encounter, which is pretty good. As far as the spells go, you get all of them. So I wouldn't stress too much about which spells you're actually supposed to take. For the most part, whichever ones you can get that are negative, you should always have the highest level of inflict wounds. So inflict critical, inflict wounds mass, light or moderate mass, serious mass, and then critical mass. Just always make sure you have the correct inflict spells for your level. The higher level the inflict spell, the more damage it's going to do. And not only that, they also have a higher maximum caster level. Now, some of you might be wondering, but Strimtom, you said in the last video you were going to possibly do this with levels of wizard. Why didn't you do that? The answer is, well, first of all, if I'm playing as a cleric, I already have good healing spells. I don't need to multi-class as a wizard to get good healing. It was mostly because it would be kind of cool. Like, yeah, I can be a Pale Master hybrid, heal myself with my negative energy. But I can just use positive energy, and it also makes the gearing way easier because almost every armor piece in the game gives positive energy healing as well, and healing amp, so that's just an easier way to do it. And on top of that, look at these spells. Inflict critical mass, max cash level 40. As a result of this, I don't need to use any of the epic feats to increase the cash level of my spells. The maximum cash level on this is 40. Necrotic Ray has a maximum cash level of 25. So my cash levels are like really important for this character, and so it's very impactful for me to actually be a pure cleric and to have as many cash levels as possible, because the more cash levels I have, the damage just keeps going up. Outside of that, there is also the spell Create Undead. I cast this a few times for fun. All of the monsters are completely useless. You never want to take that at all. But then you just grab all the important buffs. The ones that are standout, I've mentioned these before, but it's always bears repeating. Bless is +5 to hit for all your friends, and +5 to your saves versus fear. When you don't have access to fear immunity, this is pretty good. Resist energy is amazing, and you want to cast this all the time. Prayer is +5 to saves and skill checks for yourself, and for your friends, it's attack rolls and weapon damage. On top of this, it's a debuff. So if you decide to stand next to a final boss, cast prayer on them, then all of a sudden they get -5 to their saving throws, which for you is great. I was casting prayer whenever I got next to a boss, and also using my shifter howl at the same time, and it worked out pretty well. Being able to dump a boss's saves by 12 means it doesn't even matter what type of monster it is, unless it's like a construct, you're always going to be able to break through, even on like a higher difficulty you normally wouldn't be able to land on monsters. Next, Magic Circle Against Evil, very good for making you immune to mental compulsions such as command, which is a big one. So that way, no more command, no one telling you just, oh, lie down, and you're just like, ugh. None of that. Instead, you get to stay standing and not have to worry about it. We've also got Mass Spell Resistance, Holy Aura, which is just an amazing spell for another +4 to all saves. So I highly recommend that. And that's basically it. Another important note is that when you get to level 20, you get all of the light spells as well as Word of Balance. Word of Balance is a really high amount of damage, so I would definitely recommend trying putting Word of Balance into your build, especially against like demons and other things that have 2 different alignments. You can also try using Sunbeam as well, another very high damage spell. However, I believe Sunbeam does have a reflex save, so you got to be a little mindful about that because it's an evocation spell, so it's not always going to work for you. Now, as far as the enhancement tree goes, this is kind of how I would do it. I'm not sure about this 100%, but there are a couple things that I do like about this tree. So specifically Divine Disciple, you pick up all the crit, you pick up all the wisdom, you grab all the spell-like abilities that are good, negative energy burst and inflict moderate mass. I don't think that Necrotic Bolt is going to keep carrying you. I think it's better to just use the 2 Necrotic Rays that you get from 6 level spells, both the spell-like ability from your domain and also Necrotic Ray. So I don't think you need a Necrotic Bolt at this point, especially considering you can sub in some light spells. One of the reasons why you might want to sub in some light spells, such as Sunbeam, Searing Light, or other things, possibly even Sunbolt, or using the spell-like abilities out of the Exalted Angel Tree, is because there is a twist you can get called Empyrean Magic that requires you to use light spells, or fire spells, or healing spells to give you extra crit chance. And this character has that stuff built in, and especially since you get all of the light spells from Divine Disciple, you might as well just invest into that. The capstone here, if you didn't know, gives you bonuses to wisdom, as well as +2 saving throws, and all of the light spells added to your spell book. So again, it's a good idea to try to invest in that and have a little bit of that. And as a result, you're probably not going to be casting the Necrotic Bolt over here too often. So where do you put the rest of your points? Well, I spent a lot of points in Shifter. I really like the regenerating shift. I think this feature is really powerful. Being able to shift anytime you want to get that extra wisdom. With this, once you have this, it doesn't matter what your constitution is. It doesn't matter what your extended shifting is. It's almost impossible to run out of shifts at this point. So I shift literally on cooldown every time, and I never run out. Plus, you get the extra wisdom here, which is pretty good. I use the Howl because it increases my saving throws, but most importantly, it decreases the saving throws of my enemies, which I really like. So right now, my Howl is reducing saving throws by 5 on my enemies. Very useful. The ability to cast while raging is important, plus you can't say wrong or say no to 100 mana. And then finally, I like the Wild Magic, which gives you lesser displacement. I think that if you have an item that gives you lesser displacement, you probably sub out the Wild Magic, but until that time, I like using this one. And then with the rest of my points, I put my points in Fey Dark Illusionist for a few reasons. Number one, +3 to all saves. That's really good. And immunity to fear, perfect. You've got my back for some extra magical resistance rating, and if I happen to get dispelled by a monster or an effect, I don't have to worry about getting killed by magic missiles. The extra spell penetration here is really nice. It's 1 point per spell penetration as opposed to 2 points per spell penetration, which is really good for this character, and you need a lot of spell penetration to make your character work. And then grabbing 4 points of wisdom and color spray is not too bad. Originally, I was using Howl of Terror up here with the enchantments, and it's really good, but if you just take your enchantment items and swap them into illusion items, it's the same between Howl of Terror and Greater Color Spray, and honestly, Greater Color Spray has a bit of a better range on it, so I like this spell a little bit better. Important note as well, I'm actually taking Heighten with this character, and Heighten is useful for negative energy burst, and inflict moderate wounds mass, and your destruction spell-like ability, and Greater Color Spray. So it increases the DCs by a lot, so that's why I actually do take Heighten on this character. I think it works out pretty good. As far as if there's any other adjustments and changes you can make, I have Falconry here just because you may consider wanting to be maybe a bit tankier. Maybe you have higher DCs. Maybe you're not playing as a shifter and you don't want to put as many points in the race tree. Right here would be good. Conditioning, you got this here, plus 5% to quality bonus to maximum hit points, and you can pick up a little bit of wisdom here. That's pretty much out of Falconry. The other two trees, I'm not big fans of. War Priest gives you basically nothing other than, yeah, it gives you some health. Sure, it gives you some like physical resistance rating, but that's pretty much it. Radiant Servant is kind of interesting. I really don't like the heals. I used to think that Positive Energy Burst would be good. Since this character has no charisma, I basically can't turn anything. I have no turns. It's not that great. But I do think that if you have a little bit of charisma on your character, it's probably worth it to not go as deep into Fey Dark Illusionist or even Shifter and grabbing the Mighty Turning here so you can actually turn stuff throughout the game and then also taking Positive Energy Burst. So definitely consider that if you put charisma into your character and you don't want to spend as many points in Shifter, or if you have racial points and you're like, well, I got 12 racial points to spend. So like you put them in here and you still got 12 points left over, then yes, grab this turning, grab the Positive Energy Burst, and maximize and empower that bad boy to heal yourself and all your friends when there's no undead present. And that's pretty much it. As you go into the end game, this character is going to perform pretty well. The damage is going to continue to scale. My character doesn't even have a lot of spell power right now. I have 197. You're expecting to see around like 800 to 900 with this character, and I was already hitting for like around 1,000 outside of Reaper mode with some of my mass inflict spells. So you can expect damage at the level cap with all your stats set up. Non-crits somewhere around like 5,000 to 6,000 damage on some of your mass inflicts, critically hitting with the extra critical multiplier you can pick up from Legendary Green Steel, a little over like 13,000, 14,000 damage, which is pretty good. So being able to just go and 14,000 damage somebody, not too bad, and it's something that you'll see possibly some other clerics out there doing, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately for me, Inflict Pain, Receive Gain is becoming deleted because I've got to make a brand new one, and the next build coming up is going to be a Sun Domain Cleric. who is a drow, because that's what chat voted for. And if you're out here and you're like, what do you mean chat voted for? That's right, I live stream on twitch.tv/Strimtom. And if you'd like to get out there and join that chat, join the community, and get your chance to vote for what classes show up on this channel next, well then, by golly, you better join in. Twitch.tv/Strimtom. That's twitch.tv/Strimtom. I stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, not Sundays. We do not stream on Sundays. Anyway, I have to go sink a boat. I will catch you later. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.